And we are live. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. But enough of me. I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FB Show, we are going to go right into our Week 12 game recaps, breaking down every single Week 12 matchup, all through the lens of fantasy football. So if you're excited for this video, be sure to hit that like button down below like an open receiver downfield. Also, smash that subscribe button like a power running back up the middle so you never miss a video from me. And last but not least, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. The content I am going to be producing on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok over the course of the next 5 weeks is going to be astronomical, and I'm so excited to share what I have in store for all of you guys as we approach the playoffs and, of course, championship season, which I hope as many of you win championships this year as physically possible. But let's dive right into Week 12, shall we? We're going to start off first. We're going to go back to Thanksgiving, to Thursday, and we're going to start off with the Houston Texans taking on the Detroit Lions. The Texans throttled the Lions at home in Detroit by a final score of 41-25. The Texans improved to 4-7 on the year, and the Lions dropped to 4-7. Matt Patricia was fired, head coach of the Lions, shortly after this game. So, bummer for him. Great for us because I have been complaining about Patricia all season long. But let's just get into this game specifically. Deshaun Watson went crazy. 17 of 25 for 318 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. His hot streak continues since Bill O'Brien's departure. Duke Johnson, 9 carries, caught 3 of 4 targets for 80 yards and a touchdown. Will Fuller went nuclear once again. 7 targets, 6 receptions, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Brandon Cooks had a fine game as well. 85 receiving yards, catching all 5 of his targets. Will Fuller has had double-digit fantasy games in 9 out of 11 contests. There was the Week 2 dud versus Baltimore where he was injured with that hamstring, and then there was last week as well. But other than that, Will Fuller has been spectacular for fantasy purposes. Moving over to the Lions now, Matt Stafford, 28 of 42. 295 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. This was a bit of a bummer game for Stafford, all things considered. This Texans defense had not been great, and actually early on in the game, the Lions were carving up the Texans, but that really didn't sustain throughout the course of the contest. Stafford finished with about 16 fantasy points, and that number should have been higher. Obviously, no DeAndre Swift makes that a little bit more difficult. He was out of this game with that concussion, but Adrian Peterson stepped up, and Peterson played pretty great. 15 carries, 55 yards, and 2 scores. If you guys actually followed along on my Twitter, I didn't do individual game previews for this on YouTube, but I did go through my thought process of start-sit for each of the Thursday games. And in that preview, I said that Adrian Peterson should be in your lineups because I think he was a safe option and had a lot of potential to get into the end zone. So he did so twice for you. TJ Hawkinson continues his dominance. 8 targets, 5 receptions for 89 yards. The streak continues. Basically, all season long, he scored either a touchdown or has had 60 receiving yards, and he truly is one of the most consistent tight ends in fantasy this season. And then lastly, Marvin Jones, 12 targets, 6 receptions, 48 yards. Really a dud game from him without Kenny Golladay. So let's talk about this game just a little bit more here. And there's really not a whole lot else to say. With the Texans, Deshaun Watson should never leave your lineup. We know this. So to see his dominance, though, week after week is super impressive. You look at his upcoming schedule, though, things are going to get a little bit rocky, and that kind of concerns me, especially as we enter the fantasy playoffs. So the next 3 weeks is Indianapolis, Chicago, then Indy again, and that really is just a brutal run for a team to go through. It's very similar to what the Titans just went through, and we saw how Ryan Tannehill kind of struggled in those matchups. So I do have some concern over the Texans offense going forward. How much is yet to be decided because they have been so dominant as of late, but it is just something to kind of keep in the back of your head. Hey, your Texans offensive pieces, you might not be able to rely on them to the level that you have recently in terms of fantasy purposes. David Johnson should be back next week, if I'm not mistaken, from that concussion, so that's good news if you are the David Johnson owner. Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks are great. They should pretty much be in your lineup every single week. Obviously, we'll see how that changes in the upcoming weeks, but as of now, these are guys that should be in your lineup pretty much as often as you can get them in, depending on who your other wide receivers are. Moving over to the Lions now real quick. Again, Stafford, just that down game. We know that the Texans have been giving up fantasy points left, right, and center. And the Lions' upcoming schedule can be a bit difficult. I'm actually more optimistic just because with the way that the Lions' defense is, and I guess the same thing can be said for the Texans in that regard too. Both these defenses are bad, so if these teams want to win games, they have to put points up on the board. And with the Lions' upcoming schedule being Chicago, so like that's not a matchup that is not a matchup I'm excited about because of the fact that Chicago's offense is bad, and so is Detroit's at this current moment in time. So that is going to be a defensive battle more than anything. So I'm down on the Lions probably in Week 13, but then they got Green Bay, Tennessee, Tampa, and Minnesota to round out the year. That's not a bad schedule, all things considered. DeAndre Swift should be back next week from that concussion, so we're good to go there. I am curious what happens with Swift. With Swift, AP, and Carryon with the new head coach. I forget who they labeled as the interim at this current moment of time. But still, having a coaching change like this in the middle of the season can be a bit tricky for fantasy purposes. We've seen what happens with the Texans, actually, ironically enough, right? Their offense went crazy once Bill O'Brien was fired. So hopefully they're going to continue to unlock DeAndre Swift, though, right? If you guys remember last week, 2 weeks ago, before Swift went out with that concussion versus Washington, he had 75% of the snaps, 16 carries, 5 targets through the air, and Swift was the workhorse of that week versus Washington's football team. So hopefully we get back to that throughout the rest of the season. Marvin Jones is who I actually really want to talk about right now. We don't really know when Kenny Golladay is going to be back. There is the expectation that he'll likely be back next week. Next week, wait, I read the 6th versus Green Bay, but the 6th would be versus Chicago. So, that's interesting. Regardless, Kenny Golladay should be back, and that means one of two things for Marvin Jones. That means that Marvin Jones is going to go back to his role as the number 2 and maybe have a little bit more consistency because Marvin Jones has proven essentially that he cannot do it as the number 1 wide receiver. But then that also means that the targets that we've seen so far from Marvin Jones, having 12 targets this game, we know he's been really involved over the course of the past several contests actually. 10 targets, 7 targets, 6. That number is going to go down substantially. So we thought that we could rely on Marvin Jones during the absence of Kenny G, and now we might not be able to rely on him pretty much at all. Like, he's just a guy who I'm really having trouble trying to figure out just how viable he actually is going to be. He put together a nice string of games while Kenny G was out, 3 straight games with a touchdown. But even still, what happens when Kenny G comes back? Are we going to be confident starting Marvin Jones in those matchups when it is championship week, when it is win in advance, right? So it really is just about trying to figure out what your team looks like. Pretty much just tier out your wide receivers, tier out your running backs, and figure out the realm of possibilities that it would take for you to start Marvin Jones. And that's pretty much your answer as to how you know when to start some of your bench wide receivers or some of your bench running backs as well. TJ Hawkinson is also great. Like, that's just it. Like, send tweet. TJ Hawkinson truly is such a spectacular talent. He was feasting upon the Texans defense early on, and then for whatever reason, they just inexplicably stopped throwing to him. He finished the game with 8 targets. He probably should have had at least 12. He was playing that well. They ran a few trick plays. He was wide open down the middle of the field, and his schedule is pretty nice with Chicago, who actually gives up a good amount of points to the tight end, Green Bay, Tennessee, Minnesota, and Tampa. So I'm really excited about Hawkinson for the rest of the year. Up next, we're going to talk about the Washington football team taking on the Dallas Cowboys in a game that was spectacular. The Washington football team crushed Dallas by a final score of 41-16. Washington improves to 4-7 on the year, and the Cowboys fall to 3-8. Alex Smith, 19 of 26, 149 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. But that's not the story here. The story is about Antonio Gibson, who I believe for the second straight week has seen above 50% of the snaps. Yes, indeed. 20 carries, caught 5 of 7 targets for 136 total yards, and 3 touchdowns against Dallas. It was a spectacular performance from the rookie running back out of Memphis. He is the first rookie to have 3 touchdowns on a Thanksgiving game since Randy Moss did it damn near 20 years ago, right? And then, of course, Terry McLaurin is great as well. 9 targets, 7 receptions for 92 yards. But the big story here for Washington, along with Gibson, is that J.D. McKissic only had 2 targets. We're going to spend a bit of time talking about these guys in just a moment. Going over to Dallas, Andy Dalton was 25 of 35 for 215 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. Zeke, 10 carries, caught 1 of 3 targets for 39 total yards and a fumble. Maybe the worst game of his career. He's lost 5 fumbles on the year so far, and I believe he has 9 fumbles in total. Amari Cooper continues to impress even without Dak Prescott. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 112 receiving yards, and a touchdown. So I really just want to, the big thing here is Antonio Gibson. This really is just where we're at now. Over the course of the past 2 games, he's seen over 50% of the snaps. Last week it was 51%, and this week he jumped all the way up to 65, which is actually 1 percentage point higher than his previous career high. So this does take the cake. And I also just want to highlight that Antonio Gibson just feasts on the Cowboys. If you guys remember earlier on in the year, he also had 20 attempts for 128 yards and a score. So he pretty much had almost identical stat lines in both games. But the difference is obviously the 3 touchdowns compared to the 1 that he scored versus Dallas in Week 7. And the other thing that I really want to note here, again, going back to J.D. McKissic, is McKissic only had 2 targets. And the thing that we've learned from McKissic and Ron Rivera and Scott Turner over the course of the season is that they basically have used McKissic as that third down back. We know that Alex Smith is the check down king, and as a result has targeted J.D. McKissic left, right, and center, right? I mean, we've seen multiple games this season where he's had double-digit targets, right? But Antonio Gibson had 6 targets in the first half. In the first half alone, and then he just went nuclear, and they got out to a lead, so Smith didn't have to check down. But just understanding just how involved Antonio Gibson was so early on in the game, before the game was out of hand, really is it's the most important takeaway for me. We've been waiting all season long for this coaching staff to make the change to Gibson, even just in the limited snaps he was getting, right? He was basically averaging 43 snaps or 43% of the snaps every single week, and seeing the production that he was putting up was unbelievable, to be honest, right? We've seen running backs in timeshares. We've seen Aaron Jones in a timeshare. We've seen Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman in timeshares. We've seen Raheem Mostert in timeshares, right? We know that running backs in timeshares can produce. But it's very, very unlikely that we see the running back with the less amount of snaps, the lesser amount, the least amount of snaps, produce in such a dominant way that Gibson was, right? Because in those running back by committee splits, right? Devonta Freeman was typically averaging 55% of the snaps. Aaron Jones in Green Bay typically averages 60% of the snaps. Raheem Mostert typically averages 65% of the snaps. And, so we've seen running back by committees work. And we've seen running backs in those committees produce well for fantasy. But it's always the running back who sees the majority of the snaps. And for Antonio Gibson, it was the opposite. And, that's the thing that was so incredible, right? This rookie making this transition from wide receiver to running back. It was so clear that he would be able to do this, right? And the coaching staff repeatedly instilled confidence in saying, hey, we know he can do this too. And it really was just a matter of when, not if. And so to see Gibson get the full workload pretty much back-to-back games essentially and just continue to show out. I mean, just to read off his game log over the course of the past 5 weeks, 18.8, 10, 20.5, 16.9, and 34.1. Yo, Antonio Gibson is legitimately locked in to be a top 10 back rest of season. The schedule upcoming is a bit tricky with Pittsburgh and then San Fran, but if you can survive that and make it to your championships, you are looking at Seattle, Carolina, and Philly, and holy shit am I excited for those championship games. If you got the running back depth where you don't have to rely on Gibson in those two matchups and you can kind of stash him until the championship, that's going to be your best case scenario and kind of your dream option if you are loaded at running back. Terry McLaurin is great. And then let's just quickly talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Last week, CeeDee Lamb got into the end zone, and that really was the difference between his production in this game and last. And that is going to be it for the rest of the year, honestly. CeeDee Lamb's just at this point where he's currently going to be touchdown dependent. Yes, he's still getting about 6 or 7 targets a game, but it's not enough with it just in terms of sheer yardage to where I think you have any confidence putting him into your fantasy lineup. On the other hand, Amari Cooper is locked in. He's pretty much locked in to be that A.J. Green role that Andy Dalton is used to, so you can continue to start Amari Cooper with confidence. And then lastly, Zeke. I don't know what to make of Zeke at this current moment of time. First off, bust, probably absolutely, just you can stamp that on his forehead. Just his production throughout the course of the year, it was great when Dak was there, and then post-Dak, it's been down the shitter. He's still getting the opportunity. He's still playing about 70% of the snaps. Yes, Tony Pollard has had a bit of an increase in production, but you have to continue to start Zeke just because the talent and the volume is there. The fumbling, major issue. Where that came from, who fucking knows, right? It is super annoying, and I totally get that. But even this upcoming schedule of Baltimore, that's brutal for week 13, right? We're still a week out from the playoffs. But that playoff schedule is Cincinnati, San Fran, Philly, and then the Giants in 17 if you have a 17 championship. I think it's still interesting. You need to start Zeke. The talent's there. The opportunity's still there. And it looks like that hopefully as Andy Dalton gets back and more comfortable within this offense and learning how it works, that Zeke and this offense in total should be able to have an increase in production as the year comes to a close. Our next game is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Atlanta Falcons, and this takes us all the way to Sunday because the Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens game was postponed till Tuesday. So let's talk about this. The Las Vegas Raiders got mollywopped by the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta by a final score of 43-6. The Raiders now lose 2 straight games, dating back to the Chiefs game last week. They fall to 6-5, and the Falcons improve to 4-7. Derek Carr, my man, what are you doing? 22 of 34 for 215 passing yards and 4 turnovers. Josh Jacobs, a dud game as well. 7 carries, caught 3 passes for 44 total yards and a fumble. Nelson Aguilar, 6 targets, 5 receptions for 54 yards. And Darren Waller, 4 receptions, 7 targets, 23 yards. If you're the Raiders, just burn this game, throw it away. It didn't happen. On to the next one. And then going over to the Falcons side of the ball, Julio Jones and Todd Gurley both did not play. Julio obviously has that reoccurring hamstring issue, and Todd Gurley had a knee injury. I believe that was unrelated to the arthritis that he has. Matt Ryan in this ball game, 22 of 39 completions, 185 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as an interception. Ito Smith was the lead back in this game, not Brian Hill. 12 carries. Caught 4 of 5 targets for 75 total yards and a touchdown. Calvin Ridley doing Calvin Ridley things, 50 yards, 1 touchdown, catching 6 of 9 targets. And then Hayden Hurst turned in a fine game, all things considered. He had 8 targets, so you'd love to see him have more than 48 yards. He caught 4 passes, and without Julio, you would love to see Hurst be a little bit more productive with his snaps and his targets. So a few things that I want to talk about here real quick. First off, again, for Vegas, burn it if you own Josh Jacobs, if you own Darren Waller. Don't worry about it. Like, just flush it from your head. This game did not exist. I want to talk about Nelson Agholor real quick. He saw 6 targets. One of my big concerns with him has been if you aren't getting into the end zone, you aren't going to have a great fantasy game. And we saw that yet again. In half-point formats, he put up 7.9, and it's just like that's just not going to get it done when you are looking for double digits. It's like that's the thing, right? And half point, basically your baseline is 10 fantasy points. Like, that has to be your baseline. Anything under that is pretty much a dud, all things considered. So that's what we've seen from Agholor outside of the fact when he gets a touchdown, right? That touchdown really does make up all the difference. And I don't think I can predict when Derek Carr is going to have a good game, when Derek Carr is going to have a bad game, or who the touchdown distribution is going to go to. So with that being said, Nelson Agholor, I was pretty much already out before, but this game really does prove and cement that for me. In a matchup that was a dream scenario against this Atlanta defense, a defense that has given up over 18 points per game, or over 18 points to the quarterback position every single week. Matt Stafford was actually the lowest scoring quarterback against them at 18. Derek Carr had negative 0.2 in my scoring format. You just can't rely on him in that way, right? Derek Carr's made some improvements this year. In fact, they've been highlighted multiple times on my Twitter timeline. But when you look at his production, it really is a bit all over the place. He started off real hot, and then since the bye week, he really has cooled down. Before the bye in week 6, you're looking at an average of about 21 points per game, which really was incredible. And then you look at the games since the bye. 21, 12, 14, 8, 24, and then negative 0.2. Derek Carr, man, I don't know what happened, but you had a dream matchup here against the Falcons, and you really did squander it. I know Carr was a hot streaming option throughout this week, and he really did just kill a lot of people. And that stinks when it's week 12 and we need wins to make our way into the fantasy playoffs. Going over to the Falcons now, Matt Ryan is low-key in the same boat as Derek Carr here. Trying to predict the good Matt Ryan games has been a bit difficult, right? He's had great matchups essentially all season long and hasn't come through in the way that you would like him to, despite the talent and the weapons that he has had. I know one of the things that Jason Moore has been saying quite a bit is that the correlation between good Matt Ryan games is pretty much solely dependent on if Julio Jones is active. I'm not sure how much I buy into that, just because I do believe that Matt Ryan has other weapons around him to where if Julio isn't playing, like, that doesn't mean sit Matt Ryan. But in a matchup like this versus the Raiders, like, it's the exact same thing. Both these teams had the opportunity for this game to become an offensive slugfest because of how bad their defenses are, and with the weapons on offense that could easily carve each other up. So Matt Ryan coming here and only putting up 14 fantasy points for you really was disappointing. I don't care if Julio Jones is active or not. We saw Ito Smith get the majority of the work here without Todd Gurley. Like, that is something to note because we all thought it would be Brian Hill, and it turns out it was Ito Smith. Ito Smith is the one that got into the end zone. He got more targets. He had one less carry. So that really is just something to consider moving forward. I don't think Gurley's going to miss any more time, to be honest. But if he does, it's going to be Ito Smith over Brian Hill. Just keep that locked in the back of your head. Calvin Ridley's great. Hayden Hurst, I don't know what you do with Hayden Hurst anymore. We know that there's been, that's the thing. If you go through his targets, it's 7, 7, 7, 8, 8. Like, he gets targets. He's just not doing anything with them. Upcoming is the Saints and the Chargers before he rounds out with the Bucs, Kansas City, and Tampa again. So basically, the Falcons' schedule the rest of the way is offensive juggernaut, offensive juggernaut, offensive juggernaut. And with that being said, you could probably keep playing Hayden Hurst because of that, because of the fact that they're going to need to put points up on the board in order to win, and Hurst just has touchdown potential every single matchup, even if he hasn't gotten in the end zone as often as we would have liked to see during the early parts of this year. Up next, we have the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Buffalo Bills. The Chargers lose in a heartbreaker, in a miscommunication, in a very poor clock management. Anyways, they lose to Buffalo by a final score of 27-17. The Bills are 8-3 and currently leading the AFC East, and the Chargers fall to 3-8. Justin Herbert, the shoe kind of dropped here. 31 of 52, which again, they just let him throw the ball as many times as he wants, which is so cool for a rookie. 316 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Austin Eckler, I didn't think he was going to play this week. He was activated off the IR early Sunday morning, and if you follow me on Twitter, I said Austin Eckler is up. It looked like Kalen Ballage was going to be inactive, and that meant that they had full confidence in Eckler to give him the workload, and boy did they. 14 carries, 16 targets, caught 11 of them for 129 total yards in Eckler's first game back since week 4. It was great for my fantasy lineup, for your fantasy lineup, if you were able to withstand the absence of Austin Eckler since week 4. All right. We're not done yet, though. We still got Keenan Allen, who had 10 targets, caught 4 of them for 40 yards and a touchdown. And Hunter Henry continues to get it done. Also had 10 targets, caught 7 of them for 67 yards. On the other side, with the Bills, Josh Allen was 18 of 24 for 157 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 turnovers. Stephon Diggs, 9 targets, 7 receptions for 39 yards. And Cole Beasley had 4 targets, 2 receptions, 25 receiving yards, had 20 pass yards and a passing touchdown on a little trick play. So if you did start Cole Beasley, you weren't hurt because of that little trickery from Buffalo. Also important to note here, Devin Singletary had 14 touches and Zach Moss had 12. I believe they finished almost equal. Yeah, they were in 0.9 points of differential between the two of them. Singletary had the better game, but still, you probably aren't starting either of these Buffalo running backs unless you are absolutely desperate. All right, let's talk about this just a little bit more. So, a few notes here. Austin Eckler being back changes a lot. We know that Justin Herbert has the ability to not only throw it deep, but also the willingness to check down as well. And that's a very weird combination, right? It's not very often we see guys with a nuclear cannon also be willing to check it down as well. So we do get that nice little dynamic balance between the two. We know that he targets Keenan Allen like hell. We've seen him now target Austin Eckler multiple times like crazy too. I'm really excited about Eckler going forward. And again, if you were able to survive having Eckler on your IR for that long, you are going to be rewarded. His upcoming schedule, New England, Atlanta, Vegas, Denver, KC. That's a beautiful schedule for Austin Eckler rest of season. And honestly, that's a beautiful schedule for the Chargers. Yes, Herbert didn't play great, but he still turned in about 16 fantasy points for you. That's not the accustomed 25 that we're used to getting, right? But 16 points is not going to hurt you in any way. Josh Kelly vultured a touchdown from Eckler, so we are back to that. That is something to note as well. They just have this tendency to where if Eckler doesn't get in the first time, Josh Kelly comes in and punches it in. But luckily enough, Eckler does have that PPR floor that Josh Kelly does not have, so it does kind of make up for it. We would love to see the touchdown go Eckler's way, but that isn't always the case. Mike Williams, you got the dud Mike Williams game. It happens. Last week you got the good one, the week before that you had a dud, and the week before that you got a good one. So you are kind of just spinning the wheel on Mike Williams every single week. The talent is there, and it really is just a matter of risk management. How much risk are you willing to take? For Mike Williams, honestly, my risk management, I'm pretty high on it. Like, if I have him, I am more likely than not going to try and find a way to play him. More so as a flex than a wide receiver too, just because I know the talent and the upside is there. I know that Herbert's willing to air it out 40 yards downfield for a potential touchdown. Hunter Henry's great, not much to add there. And then again, for Buffalo, like it's the same stories every single week. It's Josh Allen is very, very good. It's Stephon Diggs is great. Down week for him, it is what it is. And then Singletary and Moss. I want to play Moss over Singletary, but I really don't want to play either of them if I have the option to pivot away. And that's it for this game. Up next, this is actually a really important one. The New York Giants taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals fall to the Giants by a final score of 19-17. The first game without Joe Burrow for Cincinnati. Giants are now 4-7 on the year and actually have a share of the NFC East, and the Bengals fall to 2-8-1. Daniel Jones, 16 of 27, 213 yards, no touchdowns, no turnovers. Jones did leave this game with a hamstring injury. He did try to come back, was not able to do so, and there are reports already coming out that the injury may cause him to miss some time. Wayne Gallman, 24 carries, 3 receptions, 91 total yards, and 1 touchdown. Gallman's just been getting into the end zone pretty consistently lately. And if he is still on your waiver wire, you absolutely have to pick him up because he has been great producing. He's been producing at a fine level for a replacement to Saquon Barkley. Just going through his game log just a little bit here. 13, 12, 14, 18, 16. He's been pretty much as consistent as it gets from the running back position. Sterling Shepard turned in 64 yards on 7 of 8 receptions, and Evan Ingram had a great game as well. 129 receiving yards, 1 fumble, and caught 6 of 9 targets. On the other side of the ball for Cincinnati, Brandon Allen gets the start here over Ryan Finley for Cincy. 17 of 29, 136 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 turnovers. Gio Bernard, 8 carries, caught 2 targets for 49 total yards. T. Higgins caught all 5 of his targets for 44 yards and a touchdown. And Tyler Boyd caught 3 of his 6 targets for only 15 yards. And you can see right here on the side, Higgins is a break glass option. And here's what I mean by this. One of the things that I was looking for specifically with a very, very close eye was what can we do with Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, T. Higgins, Gio Bernard even, in this Bengals offense without Joe Burrow. Whether it is Brandon Allen, whether it is Ryan Finley, what are we doing with these guys? Because they've been great, right? Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins were both top 24 wide receivers so far. And I just wanted to see. I've talked about this before. I have Red Zone on one monitor, and I'll have my game of the week on the other, and that's the game where I pretty much watch every single snap with a closer eye, so like it's storylines. Like last week it was Taysom Hill, this week it was Cincinnati, and trust me, this was not a fun game to have all of my attention on, but it was important because I'm a T. Higgins owner, and I need to see what I have in my once startable wide receiver. What do we do with them now? So I've assessed. So Boyd had 6 targets. Higgins actually also had 6, but there was 1 called back due to a penalty in which he actually picked up a first down. So just something to note, they pretty much had equal targets, all things considered. Boyd comes away with the touchdown and more yardage. So I do like, Higgins comes away with the touchdown and more yardage. So I do like Higgins a bit more going forward just because he looked like he was Brandon Allen's read in the red zone, which we like to see. Obviously the yardage factor is there as well. And also just kind of like the way that Higgins has cemented himself and his role in this offense. Not saying Tyler Boyd hasn't by any means, but I do think just traditionally, the wide receiver on the outside is the number 1 option for a ball club. So with Higgins and Boyd, I'm going to keep them on my bench. I don't think you can cut either of them. Yes, Boyd did not have a great game. I understand that, but the targets were still there. Yes, Brandon Allen also did not have a great game, but I think that just with the way that the season's going to go for them, they're going to have to find a way to put some level of points up on the board. But I'm going to put them on my bench. I'm not going to cut them, and they are my in case of emergency option. So if I have an Allen Robinson who popped up on the injury report and missed the game due to a hamstring injury, if I am the Julio Jones owner who just missed the game with a hamstring injury, right? If something happens where I need a spot start, I will then throw those guys into my lineup. I'm going to keep them on my bench. I'm not looking to start them by any means, but if I have to, and it's a desperation play, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and I'll bite the bullet in that regard. Or maybe I'll look to the waiver wire first, and if there's no better option there, that's when I'm going to play them. So that's my official stance going forward on T. Higgins, AJ Green, and Tyler Boyd. Our next game is going to be the Tennessee Titans taking on the Indianapolis Colts, and which was such a fun game for me to watch. The Titans throttled the Colts by a final score of 45-26. This is a very important game. If you play in a Week 17 championship and you have players on one of these teams, there's a chance that this game actually impacted who is available to start in Week 17, because the Titans improve to 8-3 on the year and the Colts fall to 7-4. Obviously, falling is a bit of a stretch, right? But the Titans do take a one-game division lead in the AFC South. Ryan Tannehill was 13 of 22 for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry, King James. Derrick Henry is the LeBron James of the NFL. Impossible to stop, just timeless, and so physically dominant compared to everybody else. Henry's stat line, 27 carries, caught 2 passes for 185 total yards and 3 touchdowns. It was a spectacular vintage Derrick Henry performance. A.J. Brown, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 98 total yards, a touchdown. Then he also had a special teams touchdowns off of an onside kick. So if you are in a platform that did reward that, great for you because you lucked your way into a touchdown. And if you are wondering why your platform didn't reward you, it's likely that those points went to the Titans special teams instead. Moving over to the Colts now, Phillip Rivers, 42 attempts, 24 completions, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Nyheim Hines was the leading running back in this game. Jordan Wilkins was in and out of the lineup battling some rib injuries. Hines, 10 carries, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 95 total yards. T.Y. Hilton gets into the end zone for the first time since October of last year, and Trey Burton has a second straight game with a touchdown. But also important to note that at the goal line, it was not Nyheim Hines. It was not Jordan Wilkins. It was Jacoby Brissett who vultured not 1, but 2 touchdowns from those Colts running backs. Few things I want to go over real quick. First off, let's talk about Jonnu Smith, who did not see a target in this game. Simply put, I believe that the Colts ranked top 5 in points allowed to the tight end. I guess top. What's the other way to put that? Because they not the most, but the least. Basically, the Colts are superb against the tight end position. So seeing Jonnu Smith go 0 for 0 here isn't really surprising. But then you also just look at the fact that, if you watch this game early on, and you saw Derrick Henry carving up this Colts defense. I mean, it looked like that Henry was legitimately on pace for 250 rushing yards in this game. It was that dominant. You knew automatically there was no need for this team to even try and throw the ball. Again, Derrick Henry had 27 carries. Ryan Tannehill had 22 pass attempts. So you can clearly see how this game was kind of scripted to go early on. Obviously, Tannehill's performance gets in the end zone through a rushing touchdown as well, which was actually really disappointing as a Derrick Henry owner, right? Like, not to get too greedy, but I believe it was 1st and goal. It's 1st and goal from the 2. Henry already has 3 touchdowns on the day, and of course they run a freaking option, a fake handoff to Derrick Henry, and everybody should go after Henry because he has 3 fucking touchdowns on the day, and Tannehill takes it the other side for an easy score. So if you started Tannehill, good for you. I did not. I started Taysom Hill instead. Didn't hurt me because, again, I wanted to see what Tannehill would do in this matchup. He struggled recently as of late, just going through brutal defense after brutal defense. But if you started Tannehill, still it worked out for you in that regard. A big reason why it worked out for you is because A.J. Brown had another 62-yard touchdown. A.J. Brown is legitimately fucking incredible. I'm going to give out a real big hot take right now, and I'm perfectly okay with that, and that is, A.J. Brown is the best wide receiver in football. I know I just gassed up Devontae Adams, who actually just scored earlier in this Sunday night game versus the Bears, but I don't care. What A.J. Brown does on the football field every single goddamn week is the most impressive thing I think I may have ever seen from an athlete. The consistent monster plays, the strength, the power, the speed. He does everything. And it's just so incredible to watch. You look at his past 7 games, 8 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. He scored a touchdown in 7 of them. It's unbelievable. I cannot believe what I'm seeing from A.J. Brown, right? DK Metcalf started off the season hot. I get it. But what A.J. Brown is doing at 23 years old on back-to-back seasons without missing a beat is... It's beautiful. It is immaculate. I cannot believe it. And it's just so damn cool to watch. You look at his upcoming schedule too, just for the Titans overall. Cleveland, Jacksonville, Detroit, Green Bay, and Houston. Oh, baby. As somebody who has all 4 of the Titans players across all of my teams, I'm so excited for the Titans' rest of season schedule. And with that being said, I hope I don't have to face any of them in my fantasy playoffs. In fact, I hope I don't. I know another playoff team is A.J. Brown, and so knowing the fact that I have Ryan Tannehill, that's actually going to be minimized just a little bit, the effects of a good Brown performance. But man, I don't want to face any Titans if I can avoid it in the fantasy playoffs. That's for sure. Going over to the Colts. Let's see. Big things here. Jonathan Taylor did not play because he was placed on the COVID list on Saturday morning. Michael Pittman, down game, still had 9 targets, which is something I was going to try and put in the box score, but I felt like noting Brissett's 2 vulture touchdowns just for the brand was a better option. So Pittman still had 9 targets, easily led the team, and he is the number 1 guy in this Colts receiving game. And Trey Burton gets in the end zone as well for the 2nd straight week. I think I mentioned that. Just something to note, because if you look at Trey Burton's rest of season schedule, it is Houston, it is Vegas, it is Houston, it is Pittsburgh, and it is Jacksonville. And those are incredible matchups for the tight end outside of Pittsburgh. So if you are streaming options, maybe you have a Hayden Hurst and you aren't confident with him throughout the rest of the season, look for Trey Burton, because I guarantee you he's going to be on your waiver wire, because I feel like he's probably 10% owned, if that, right? And then Phillip Rivers continues to get it done in his own Phillip Rivers ways, right? He's going to throw a touchdown, he's going to throw an interception. He'll throw for 250, almost 300 yards, and he'll get into the end zone once or twice as well. Rivers' rest of season schedule, I've talked about this previously, it's whoo! Both these squads have a really great rest of season schedule. I'm super excited to watch them perform during the fantasy playoffs. Up next, the Cleveland Browns taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was a fun game because the Jaguars gave the Browns a game. Ultimately, though, Cleveland came away with a victory, defeating Jacksonville by a final score of 27-25. The Browns are 8-3. And the Jags are 1-10. Jacksonville fired GM David Caldwell after this game. Baker Mayfield for the Browns was 19 of 29 for 258 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb, 19 carries, caught all 3 of his targets for 176 total yards and a score. Jarvis Landry on his birthday comes through in a monster way for your team. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 143 yards and a touchdown. And Austin Hooper caught both of his targets for 13 yards, but got into the end zone. So if you started Hooper, this was a great game to do so. Nick Chubb is also averaging over 100 rushing yards per game. On the other side for the Jags, Mike Glennon gets his first start since, I think, 2018. 20 completions, 35 attempts, 235 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. James Robinson, you know the story here. 22 carries. Caught 5 of 6 targets for 159 yards and a score. And Colin Johnson, rookie out of Texas, 8 targets, 4 receptions for 96 yards and a score. DJ Chark did not play in this game due to that rib injury. All right, a few things I want to talk about here. Honestly, this might be one of my shortest recaps because just things are so pretty standard here. What Jarvis Landry did is not entirely surprising. I know I backed off of Jarvis and Austin Hooper this game, but there was somebody who actually tweeted me this morning, hey, would you start Juju or Jarvis? I did say Jarvis just because I like the matchup versus Jacksonville just a little bit more, and I'm very unsure about what happens on Tuesday night. But Jarvis finally comes through with a ton of targets. The receptions were there, the yardage and the score helps too. You look at the Browns' rest of season schedule with Tennessee, Baltimore, the Giants, and the Jets in weeks 15 and 16. There is a potential for Jarvis Landry to be viable. If you still have him, I may hold him, and if he is on your waiver wire, just keep that watchful eye out, because I feel like after this game, he might get looked at just a little bit, so you may have to actually spend up to get him. But if he slides through your waiver wire cracks, just consider the fact that in 15 and 16, it is the Jets and the Giants, and those are two good matchups for the Browns. Nick Chubb's incredible. This backfield with Kareem Hunt and Chubb is incredible. And I don't know what else to say besides the fact, if you look at Nick Chubb's rushing numbers, 60 yards, 120, 143, 120, 114, 144. I mean, Nick Chubb really is one of the best running backs, maybe the most underrated running back in the NFL. Kareem Hunt just didn't get it done because he didn't have to, right? So there was a bust game here from Kareem Hunt, all things considered, but this was the Nick Chubb show at the end of the day with the usage he was getting. And again, Kareem Hunt just really is the pass catching back, and because the Browns were pretty much leading all game long, there was no need to utilize Hunt in those situations. Moving over to the Jags real quick, Mike Glennon showed some level of competence, which was nice. Obviously, 20 of 35 isn't great. But that 235 passing yards, we kind of like that, and there is potential for that to go up as time progresses. We may even see Gardner Minshew back in action for Jacksonville next week, and that's something that I'm actually really keeping an eye on. Their schedule isn't great in the playoffs. You look at Baltimore, Chicago, and Indy, 15 through 17, so there's no way in hell I'm going to play anybody outside of James Robinson in those matchups. But before that, in week 12 and 14, it's Minnesota and Tennessee. And if that is the case, Gardner Minshew may be a viable streaming option for you in those games. James Robinson is fucking incredible. But I do want to spend a quick moment and talk about a tweet that I saw earlier today. Fantasy Pros tweeted out, in a redraft league, does James Robinson go in the top 6? And I thought about that, and I'm like, what are we fucking doing here? James Robinson is great. I'm not saying he's not. I've praised James Robinson since the time he stepped on the field this year. But oh my God, to consider James Robinson as a top 6 running back, what is he right now? I'm very curious, because I believe, so he's running back 6 in standard, running back 5 in PPR. He's running back 5 in PPR with Christian McCaffrey missing multiple games, with Austin Eckler missing multiple games. Who else has been hurt? Zeke Elliott on an absolute downslide, right? 6 is just too high. 6 is way too high. I'm taking, it's Cook, CMC, Henry, Zeke, Kamara. That's 5 right there. With the way that Antonio Gibson is playing, that might make 6. And then from there, you kind of get in that range of Swift, Mixon, Drake, Sanders, Eckler, Jacobs. And where do you slide James Robinson into that? Probably towards the end of that list. So I got James Robinson around RB10 if we're talking about early projections for next season. But top 6 is blatantly absurd. All things considered. I love you, J-Rob, especially for pretty much the rest of this season. But next year, let's pump the brakes just a little bit. Up next, we have the Carolina Panthers taking on the Minnesota Vikings. This game was actually a whole lot of fun. So the Vikings defeat the Panthers by a final score of 28-27. The Vikings came storming back in the second half after the Panthers had a pretty substantial lead on them. Minnesota improves to 5-6 on the year, and Carolina falls to 4-8 after their 3-4 start. It has been rough sledding for the Panthers as of late. Teddy Bridgewater coming back off that MCL injury, 19 of 36, 257 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Mike Davis, the fall from the heavens continues just a little bit here. 15 carries, caught 3 targets for 79 total yards. Robbie Anderson gets into the end zone for the second time this season, catching 4 of 7 targets for 94 yards and a score. And Curtis Samuel caught all 5 of his targets for 77 total yards. DJ Moore left this game with a foot/ankle injury. It did not look good. He had 9 targets, caught 4 of them for 61 yards before exiting. A big blow to this Panthers offense for sure, depending on the severity of Moore's injury. On the other side of Minnesota, Kirk Cousins was 34 of 45 for 307 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a fumble. This was a good Kirk Cousins game. These things are kind of hard to predict. Like, there are a few quarterbacks where I'm, like, really struggling trying to figure out who has a good matchup and who doesn't. This being one of them, like, between Kirk, Wentz, and Derek Carr, it's like those 3 guys. I have no idea when to ever start them. But what Kirk Cousins has done over the course of the past 3 weeks, 23 points, 20, 25, and 28. He has been turning in a lot of really good performances, and that does come off of the back of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Thielen was out this game, but Justin Jefferson had 13 targets, caught 7 passes for 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns. There were also 2 other Minnesota Vikings wide receivers who had 7 receptions as well. And Dalvin Cook had 18 carries, caught 4 passes for 82 total yards, and a fumble. So a few things that I want to talk about here. The first being, let's talk about Mike Davis just a little bit here, because the fall has absolutely happened. And there was a few games here. I want to actually pull up Christian McCaffrey just so I make sure that my numbers are correct here. Right, so he only played in that game versus Kansas City. Okay. So Mike Davis, since week 6, is actually, I want to pull up Fantasy Pros for this too. Fantasy Pros. Let's go week 6. Running backs. Oh, I want to change this to PPR. Half point. Okay. So Mike Davis since week 6, and this is actually going to we can actually kind of factor. What if I don't want to factor? We're good. All right. Mike Davis since week 6, 9 points, 6, 8, 6, 6, 14, 9. The fall has definitely happened for Mike Davis, and I think that's something that we actually have to acknowledge. Next week, this team is on a bye, and that does suck if you were somebody playing a member of the Panthers or the Buccaneers, or even who we're going to talk about in just a moment, because not having these guys in must-win situations to get into the playoffs is definitely hurtful for sure. But since week 6, Mike Davis is currently running back. Let's see. Command F. Davis. Mike Davis is currently running back 21. Is that in terms of total points? That is in terms of total points. I want to go in terms of average. I wonder. In terms of average. I can't tell from here. But he's running back 21, which I guess is still startable. But even if just reading off those numbers, they are not great by any means. Like, you don't have a whole lot of confidence in that. And the big reason for his hit is just the fact that the pass catching work just magically disappeared. The reason that Mike Davis was so great is because he was getting 9 targets a game. And since he hasn't even sniffed anything above 7 since week 3, he's had 6 targets twice. And everything else has been 5 or less. So just the receiving work and utilizing Mike Davis in that CMC role just kind of vanished out of nowhere. And as a result, it really has limited Mike Davis's production over the course of the past several weeks. Robbie Anderson's great. Curtis Samuel's great. DJ Moore is great. If Moore misses a significant period of time, it really does just increase the value of the other two. But as I said on the preview, with the way that their games are all very different, they all flow really nicely together, and you can start all 3 of them on any given week because of that. Moving over to the Vikings, Not a whole lot needs to be said here. Again, trying to determine when a good Kirk Cousins game is happening can be difficult. But over the course of the past 5 weeks or so, he really has been able to get it done for you. He gets Jacksonville next week, which is nice, and Tampa, Chicago, New Orleans, and Detroit. So it's a bit rocky there, but he should be able to be somewhat productive in those matchups. So that gives me full confidence for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen moving forward. Jefferson without Thielen should be back next week, but so this was a one-game thing, it looks like. But Justin Jefferson is great. Simple as that. And so is Dalvin Cook. Bad Dalvin Cook game, yeah, for sure. But he's turned in so many good performances as of late that I'm not too concerned about Dalvin Cook. And, you were due for one, right? You were due for one. You look at him since the bye, 47, 38, 12, 21, and then 7 in this game. It's Jacksonville next week. That's going to be a great bounce back game for Dalvin Cook. He may erupt for 45 yet again. Up next, the Arizona Cardinals taking on the New England Patriots in Foxborough. The Patriots upset the Cardinals by a final score of 20-17. Arizona falls to 6-5, and the Patriots improve to 5-6. Kyler Murray was in hell. He was in shambles all game long. The Patriots blitzed a ton. They sent a ton of pressure his way, and he did make a few mistakes throughout. He was 23 of 34 for 170 yards, 30 rushing yards, and an interception. Kenyon Drake, while inefficient, gets into the end zone twice. 22 carries, caught 3 of 4 passes for 93 total yards and 2 touchdowns. And DeAndre Hopkins definitely had a bust game for sure. 5 of 7 for 55 yards, and that's it. And if you're not going to be able to get points on the board, whether it is the yardage or no touchdowns, DeAndre Hopkins really looked a bit pedestrian in this matchup. But you want to talk about pedestrian. Cam Newton, 9 of 18 for 84 passing yards, 46 rushing yards, and 2 interceptions. I mean, that's so bad, but they won, so does it really matter, right? James White gets more involved, 5 carries, 18 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and Damian Harris had 14 carries and 47 yards. Obviously, getting vultured by James White at the goal line twice definitely hurts Harris, but if you started White, that is great news for him because he wasn't really involved in the passing game as much as we were accustomed to or as much as we wanted him to be without Rex Burkhead. So James White, rest of season, is one of my must-add players off of the waiver wire this week. Again, White, we'll start there. White only had 1 target in this game, and we know that that's not his traditional role. You look at their upcoming schedule, it's the Chargers, the Rams, the Dolphins, Buffalo, and then the Jets, and that really is a great matchup for White the rest of the way. Damian Harris is still a guy who should be starting just because he does get the goal line work, and he gets the majority of carries in between the 20s. Obviously, there is the potential for him to be vultured by James White, by Cam Newton, so that does really give him a hard cap to his upside. So I like Harris as a running back. I like Harris as a running back 3 and/or flex play for that matter. And then I'm still not confident starting Jacoby Myers, Damiere Byrd. Just no. It's Cam Newton, and then it's the running backs, and that's pretty much it for me as far as the Patriots go. For Arizona, Kyler Murray just crashed and burned. It is what it is. Very similar to Dalvin Cook. You were due for a bad Kyler Murray game. He's been so great for you all season long. But if you look at, this is actually really fascinating. If you look at what Kyler did during the early part of the year, you guys know that on a lot of the platforms, these platforms, they color code a lot of their matchups, right? Between green and red. And red basically means stop, and green means go. And if you look at Kyler Murray's first 11 games, 9 of them were in the green. 3 of them were in the red. The red games were San Fran, Miami, and New England this week. Obviously, versus San Fran and Miami, it didn't matter because he still went nuclear. But the vast majority of Arizona's schedule, especially offensively, has been easy for Kyler. Going forward, it's the Rams, the Giants, the Eagles, San Fran again, and then the Rams. I'm not worried about Kyler by any means. But I do think that's actually really interesting to know how easy of a schedule he had during the first half of the season. And what he does come playoff time now, I guess we'll wait and see. DeAndre Hopkins, not worried about it. Kenyon Drake, great game from him. This is something, getting in the end zone twice. I saw a tweet that said Kenyon Drake is doing what we expected him to when we drafted him in the first round. Yes, that is absolutely correct. The pass catching work still really isn't there, which is the bummer, and that schedule for him upcoming should be fine for those. Chase Edmonds, I'm still not in on Chase Edmonds. I get that the targets and things like that are there, but man, if Edmonds doesn't get into the end zone, he's not going to do a whole lot for you. And there's just other guys who I'd probably rather take my shot on at the running back position in a championship or playoff matchup. Christian Kirk disappoints for the third straight week, actually, after going crazy for a 3-week stretch before that. The targets are still there. He's still getting about 6 or 7 a game, which is nice. So if you do need that spot start, this is an offense that can obviously go nuts on any given week. Kirk kind of falls in that same category for me as T. Higgins, where if I need that spot start and I'm in that desperation play, that's when I'll play those guys. And then DeAndre Hopkins is DeAndre Hopkins. No, not much else to add there. Up next, the Miami Dolphins taking on the New York Jets, and this game was a delight. The Dolphins beat the Jets by a final score of 20-3. Miami improves to 7-4 on the year. The Jets remain winless. Tua Tagovailoa did not play in this game due to a thumb injury, and a report came out early Sunday morning that the team expects it to be a more serious injury than they initially anticipated, and Tua could miss more time. But that just means that Ryan Fitzpatrick is back into our lives. 39 attempts, 24 completions, 257 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. Another great Fitzpatrick game from him, right? This is things that we are so accustomed to seeing. Devontae Parker, 119 receiving yards, 14 targets, 8 receptions. Whenever Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing, you put Devontae Parker in your lineup without questions asked. Mike Gesicki gets into the end zone as well. 2 receptions, a score, and 35 yards. Going over to the Jets, Sam Darnold just continues to struggle in ways that are just super bizarre. He has not improved pretty much whatsoever. And it really is disappointing to see Joe Flacco come in and be more productive than Sam. Darnold was 16 of 27 for 197 yards and 2 interceptions. Frank Gore without Michael Pirine, 18 carries, 3 receptions, and 86 total yards. Rashad Perriman was one of the leading receivers on this team. 8 targets, 4 receptions for 79 yards, and Denzel Mims also had 8 targets and 4 receptions for 67 yards, Perriman and Mims both have great rest of season schedules, and this is one of the things that I really do want to talk about just going forward. Looking at some of the guys on waiver wires and who I think could be guys that you probably should add in a pinch if you need that spot start, look to the Jets. Look to the Jets. It's not pretty. It's not fun. It doesn't feel great to start a member of the Jets, but just understanding what Denzel Mims has done in his 5 games in the NFL and understanding what Perriman has done, especially with the reemergence and the resurgence of his career dating back to last season. These are both guys who can get a decent amount of yardage, and Perriman has more touchdown potential as well. So just reading off their schedule rest of season, it is a bad Raiders defense, a brutal Seattle defense, the Rams, a bad Cleveland defense, an average Cleveland defense, and then the Patriots. So you got 5 games left, and I'd start them in 3 of them, looking at Cleveland, Vegas, and Seattle. With Vegas and Seattle upcoming, those are just if you need to take your shot and you're in a win or get in situation. These are some of the guys who I really am looking to turn to help me try and either win a playoff game or make it there if you are struggling at the wide receiver position. Just to kind of read off some numbers here for you. I've raved about Denzel Mims since, let me do math here, since July? Pretty much since July, I've raved about Denzel Mims. Yes, the reception totals are not there, but the targets have always been there. 7, 3, 8, 7, 8. Like, he's literally averaging 7 targets a game outside of that 3 target game. 42 yards, 42, 62, 71, 67. So if you are just plugging him into your flex position because you need a guy, those totals are fine, right? And he just hasn't gotten into the end zone yet. And the reason why he hasn't gotten into the end zone is because Brashad Perriman has been the guy getting into the end zone as of late. But you look at Perriman, he's the one that's getting kind of similar yardage totals and similar target totals as well. 8, 2, 7, 4, 8. Like, the targets are there for both players. Brashad Perriman's numbers are 62 yards, 27, 101, 54, and 79. And then Perriman just has 3 touchdowns, and that really is the difference maker. But if you do need that spot start, those are the guys who I'm really looking for. Quickly, just to touch on the Dolphins running backs. Don't worry about it. Myles Gaskin should be back next week, and that's all I care about. That is all I care about. We all thought it would be Matt Breida here without Sullivan Ahmed, and then it was DeAndre Washington. So we all got. It is what it is. Flush it. Move on. Myles Gaskin is back, and things are going to kind of return to normal for the Dolphins backfield. If Fitzpatrick is up and going in the absence of Tua, just know that the schedule is very nice for him as well. You get Cincinnati, Kansas City, New England, Vegas, and then Buffalo to round out the year. Fitzmagic is going to help win people some championships again. That's so fucking cool. But I think that's it for this game. Let's move on to the next one. And that is going to be the craziest game of this week. The New Orleans Saints taking on the Denver Broncos in a what the fuck is happening performance of 2020, right? This game summed up 2020. The Saints waxed Denver by a final score of 31-3. The Saints have won 8 in a row. They're 9-2 on the year, and the Broncos fall to 4-7. But the big reason for it is because the Broncos did not have a quarterback. And they did not have a quarterback because Jeff Driscoll tested positive, and all the other quarterbacks, they all came in on, I believe it was Thursday or Friday. This is all according to Broncos head coach Vic Fangio. They all came in on Friday to watch film together, and they were not wearing their mask. And so because of close contact tracing, all the Broncos quarterbacks were ruled out for this game. So they had to bring in Kendall Hinton off of the practice squad. He's a wide receiver, used to play some quarterback at Wake Forest, and this game was just a fucking shit show. They were running Hinton at quarterback. They were running Gordon, Lindsey, and Freeman out of the Wildcat, and it was just a disaster as soon as this started. This game was pulled from every single sports book, excuse me. So let's just talk about the Saints real quick, right? Taysom Hill gets to start again. 9 for 16, 78 yards, 44 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and an interception. Alvin Kamara, 11 carries, 54 yards. Latavius Murray, 19 carries, 124 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Michael Thomas had 50 yards on 4 receptions. Alvin Kamara has had 3 targets over the course of the past 2 games with Taysom Hill. More on that in just a little bit. For the Broncos, Melvin Gordon had 31 yards, and Philip Lindsay left the game with a knee injury. That's it. I'm not spending time talking about anybody on the Broncos. We don't need to worry about them whatsoever. For the Saints, though, we get one more week of Taysom Hill versus Atlanta next week, the team who he just carved up 2 weeks ago. Having Taysom Hill at quarterback has been so much fucking fun. I don't care if the passing guards aren't there. You guys know I love running quarterbacks. That is how I win championships. Essentially, it is be the running back king of your league and then also start running quarterbacks. It's just the way this system works. So to see Taysom Hill come in and have 17 fantasy points, loved it personally. But somebody who does not like Taysom Hill is Alvin Kamara. And that's really where I want to spend a good bit of time talking about. I've noticed this more and more where running backs on teams with a rushing quarterback just don't get check down work because that quarterback is thinking, if read option, or I'm sorry, if they're reading the field and option 1, 2, or 3 aren't open, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna take it myself, right? Where so often if 1, 2, and 3 are not open, option 4 is that check down, and there's just no need for it when your quarterback is mobile, when your quarterback has the athleticism to get to the first down, and that's what we've seen with Alvin Kamara. I said going into this game, if you're starting Kamara, you're starting him on a 70%. You're starting him at 70% capacity, right? Fully unlocked Kamara is what we've seen, where he gets 8 targets, 10 targets, 13 targets a game, but you're not even getting that. 2 games, 3 targets in total. It's just been removed entirely from the Saints playbook. And when you are looking at Kamara now, it is just something to consider, but don't panic. I think the big thing with Kamara is to not panic, because we'll get one more game of Taysom Hill, then Drew Brees should be back. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think he's going to. I think Drew Brees is going to miss more time than people expect him to, and that's kind of throwing a wrench into my plans as somebody who's starting Taysom Hill with Ryan Tannehill on my bench, because I would like that open bench spot. I don't like to roster 2 quarterbacks. So to see this play out for Kamara, just understand when you are starting him, you are not getting Alvin Kamara that you knew for the first 10 weeks of the season. No. You are getting Kamara, honestly, we can say now, at 50%. You are getting 50% of Alvin Kamara, because the other 50% was just thrown out the window entirely. Just something to keep in mind going forward, and really just viewing your perception of Kamara in that way. He's just not going to be the same player with Taysom Hill in the lineup. Mike Thomas, not worried about it. He'll be fine. Latavius Murray, big game here. Really was just a product of the game script. And the fact that he's the other running back in this committee, right? We know that Alvin Kamara, they intentionally limit his touches. So to see a game go like this and Latavius Murray get 19 carries as opposed to Kamara's 11 makes a lot of sense. My man Frank on Twitter said that this was going to be a big Latavius Murray week, and he was dead right about that, for sure. So shout out to him for a great call there. But yeah, just understanding that, hey, this Kamara thing is going to go a lot different than we were all expecting it to, in ways that I don't think we fully realized, right? We knew what Alvin Kamara is, and that is just a guy who does everything. He's very, very similar to Christian McCaffrey. But with Taysom Hill in the lineup, there is no way that he's going to reach his full potential, because just the offense moves a lot differently when Hill is there and not Drew Brees. Up next, the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. The 49ers win as time expired off of a Robbie Gould field goal. They defeat the Rams by a final score of 23-20. Nick Mullins was 24 of 35 for 252 passing yards and an interception. Raheem Mostert, in his first game back from his knee injury, 16 carries, 43 yards, 1 touchdown, and a fumble. Fine with it. Still a great game from him. And Deebo Samuel really is a big storyline here. 13 targets, 11 receptions, 133 total yards in his first game back from a hamstring injury. Going over to the Rams now, Jared Goff. This was a bad Jared Goff game. No other way to put it. 19 of 31, 198 passing yards and 3 turnovers. Cam Akers, 84 yards and a touchdown. Darrell Henderson still led the team in carries, though, with 10. Akers had 9. And then Robert Woods had 12 targets, 7 receptions for 88 total yards. Few things I want to say here real quick. For the 49ers, 1, Raheem Mostert, just check your waiver wire just in case he was dropped, because if he was, he's waiver priority number 1. Number 2, check your waiver wire if Deebo Samuel is there, because if Deebo Samuel is there, he's waiver priority number 2, right? It's 1, and it's 2. These two guys, the 49ers, are getting their offensive firepower back. We'll see when Jimmy G returns, but we do know that Nick Mullins is competent enough at quarterback to get Deebo involved. We saw Deebo in this game have a few breakaway plays. And what actually really sucks for me personally, because I was starting Taysom Hill this week, and Deebo Samuel came off of IR, I didn't have a spot for Samuel. And because I wanted to play Taysom Hill over Ryan Tannehill because I was just scared of that Colts defense, I dropped Deebo Samuel. And now I'm going to spend every single fab dollar I have left to get him back. It's really unfortunate that I have to spend that fab that I probably shouldn't have had to get Deebo. But man, just the talent is there. Like we've known this about Deebo Samuel. He's hyper talented, has a tendency to miss some games due to injury, but when he is on the field, he's absolutely electric. And he's shown this. Kyle Shanahan loves him, and that's going to be a great combination for the 49ers going forward. For the Rams here, we are getting to a point now where Cam Akers is getting more and more involved, slowly but surely. You look at 10 touches, 5, and then 9 the past 3 games. Darrell Henderson hasn't been productive as he was earlier in the year. And what does this mean for the Rams backfield? It means we aren't playing any of them. We are officially all hands off. There's no need to try and figure out who is who. So same thing with Buffalo and the Ravens. We are just done with this backfield. They aren't going to help us win any fantasy championships unless something drastic happens. Robert Woods is great. You start him every single week. Cooper Kupp, down week coming off of the big game that he just had. I'm still fine with Cooper Kupp going forward. You look at their schedule rest of season. Arizona, New England, the Jets, Seattle, and Arizona again. The Rams offense, specifically pass catchers, are going to make a big impact going forward. Up next, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home versus the Kansas City Chiefs in a game that was very, very exciting for a number of different reasons. The Chiefs defeat the Bucs in Tampa by a final score of 27-24. The Chiefs are 10-1, and I feel like it's the quietest 10-1 start in NFL history. I feel like nobody's talking about this, and it's so impressive that we've got to this point where we just don't care that the Chiefs are 10-1 because we expect it from Patrick Mahomes and company. Speaking of Mahomes, 37 of 49, 462 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and a fumble. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 11 carries, caught 2 targets for 39 total yards. Just an absolute dud game from him and Le'Veon Bell if you started them. But the big reason why it was a dud game is because of Tyreek fucking Hill. 15 targets, 13 receptions, 269 receiving yards, and 3 fucking touchdowns. This might be legitimately the best fantasy performance I have ever seen. And not only that, he had 200 receiving yards in the first quarter. I don't have words for. I'm going back to this. I don't have words for what I just saw, for what I just witnessed an hour ago. It was so goddamn incredible, just to see Tyreek play after play after play. Just streak up the sideline. Mahomes would hit him right in stride. Tyreek might make a move for some extra yardage or just find his way into the end zone entirely. And he lit the Bucs on fire. He lit the Twitter timeline on fire. He lit fantasy on fire. Tyreek Hill finished with 51.4 fantasy points and half-point formats. And what's likely the performance of the year. Holy shit, I can't get over what I just watched. Travis Kelce caught all 8 of his targets for 82 yards. Honestly, I don't give a fuck because Tyreek was just so damn good. Going over to the Bucs, though, Tom Brady was 27 of 41 for 345 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Ronald Jones, 9 carries, caught 1 pass for 103 total yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans gets into the end zone twice. He has 10 touchdowns for the first 12 games of the season. 9 targets, 3 receptions for 50 yards, and Rob Gronkowski had 106 receiving yards, catching 6 of 7 targets. Few things here. First off, I am now hitting the full-blown panic button on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm going to try really hard not to. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. Just the attempts have certainly gone down. He gets into the end zone twice last week versus a bad Raiders run defense, but it's just in this game, you are gonna get games with Clyde where he or Le'Veon Bell, for that matter, aren't involved because Mahomes is lighting the field on fire, because Tyreek Hill's lighting the field on fire. I like Clyde more than Lev, so I'm not going to go off the ship entirely. But even still, with Clyde getting 11 carries in this game and Le'Veon Bell getting 5, but still seeing 45%, Lev saw 30% of the snaps. But with other running backs just being on the field more and more, what's actually crazy in this game is actually Clyde had 61% of the snaps, but it doesn't matter because, yes, he's still seeing 61% of the snaps, but the workload isn't there to back it up. Only getting 11 carries in this game where, honestly, the Chiefs were ahead by a country mile going into the fourth quarter, it was disappointing that Clyde wasn't more and more involved because he should have been. So just something to keep in mind going forward. We do maybe just have to limit our expectations for Clyde even more than they already are right now. Tyreek Hill's great. Travis Kelce is great. Patrick Mahomes is great. No rocket analysis here. Tom Brady comes in, gives you 23 fantasy points. Love that. A nice bounce back game for Brady, who actually put together 2 late drives with 2 touchdowns to Mike Evans, so that was nice. Chris Godwin had another fine game, 9 targets, 8 receptions for 97 yards. Couldn't fit that into the box score. And then, Ronald Jones, again, Ronald Jones is good, and it makes no sense why the Buccaneers fucking hate him. Only 9 carries, still 36% of the snaps. I don't get it. I do not get it for the life of me. Ronald Jones has had multiple big plays throughout the course of the season. He had a 37-yard touchdown. In this game, we saw the 98-yard touchdown 2 weeks ago. I just don't know what Ronald Jones has done to piss off these Tampa Bay Buccaneer coaches because it doesn't make any sense. This team gets the bye next week, so you won't have them for week 13. But their playoff schedule, which is the big thing for me here, it's to me, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playoff schedule is the best playoff schedule in the NFL. It is Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, Atlanta. You will not find it. It is Christmas tree green on Sleeper. I'm so excited for it. As somebody who has Ronald Jones myself, as well as Antonio Brown, and I have Ryan Suckup, their kicker, just having those options. Just maybe I don't want to play Allen Robinson because I'm scared of the matchup that he might have. Or I don't trust Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky, whoever is starting. And I can put Antonio Brown, or I can find a way to flex in Ronald Jones instead. I'm so happy that I have those 2 players with their playoff schedules upcoming because it's going to be super nice. And if you have Mike Evans, who's been a touchdown machine, and you have Chris Godwin, who's been a beast in between the 20s, and you have Antonio Brown, who's had an increase in targets pretty much every single week outside of this game, which was a dud performance. If you have Tom Brady too, right? You can't forget about the GOAT. What the Buccaneers might do to round out the season has me so damn excited. And they are going to win you, me, and a ton of other people a lot of fantasy championships. And that's going to make my heart so happy. But I think that's going to do it for my Week 12 game recap. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button down below, like an open receiver downfield. Also, smash that subscribe button like a power running back up the middle so you never miss a video from me. Last but not least, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. Again, the content that is going to be coming out is insane. I'm so excited to show you guys what I have in store. And last but not least, remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever, and I will see you in the next video.